Since we have an English event, so it's a pleasure for me on behalf of the Women in Black and the Society for Austro-Arab Relations to welcome you to this really very special event. Why is it special? Because I'm not the only one. I witnessed and I saw some in the audience who had really the feeling going back to not totally to their roots, but back tens of years to the beginning, to the first years of Palestinian solidarity movement here in Europe. Many of us, or some of us, were even traveling together to the Middle East long before the Oslo Treaty was unfortunately signed and implemented or not. And at that time, one of our closest friends and one who was always on top of the list of these people we met and we visited and we admired was our lecturer of this night. Michael in English, Michel, since you are French origin, Warschawski. Yes, so you can even, he deserves it. And I think we introduced him for these people who needs that briefly in our invitation. So he was born in France. His father was rabbi in Strasbourg. And this is something I knew already. He was sent by his father to the Holy Land, to Israel, to study Talmud. Unfortunately, he took another direction. And he didn't study Talmud, but he studied Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels and Trotsky and other very intelligent people at that time, and he was very heavily involved in politics, and he was even one of the founders of a small but very important, historically and politically very important party even. With some friends in Vienna, by the way. I think I missed them because there was also a very old special friend of ours, Johnny, who joined for many years your beliefs or your ideas. Anyhow, he was very active in the Israeli left, in the anti-Zionist or Israeli left. He paid for a couple of years a price for that, but I don't want to, for sure maybe you will mention it. And later on he was the founding member of a still existing very important institution, which is till now a very important reference point for many of us, the Alternative Information Center. With even some Austrian contributions personally at the beginning. The Alternative Information Center is really a pioneer of the Israeli left Palestinian cooperation, and he was the founder, and I think you are still the soil of the center.
I am the German. I am signing the report once a year.
So this is just in short, and since we are coordinating this lecture with friends in Graz who originally took the initiative for this invitation, and we just joined them, and they took the decision to have a lecture, a topic which is just referring to the situation, to the contemporary situation in the Middle East after the last war and all the broken peace negotiation attempts and all these things the mainstream media and even the mainstream politicians are talking about, but without having any idea where it should lead. This is, so I think, my personal summary after 40 years working in this field. So Mikado will start with his lecture, and afterwards you are free to ask him whatever you want within certain limits, and for the limits I'm here. So thank you.
Thank you, and good evening. If one wants to do a political evaluation of the current situation in Palestine, of course, we have to start with Gaza.
Could you talk a little bit more to the mic?
But the mic
it's not a mic.
It's not for the room. It's just.
But I will
for
speak stronger, don't louder. We have to start with Gaza, and I will try, although sometimes I am mistaken, but I will try not to use the concept of the Gaza war or the war in Gaza, because there was no war. A war implies not necessarily two equal forces, but at least something which can be compared. It was criminal aggression, one can say even a massacre, against a civil population. On the one hand, the fourth or the fifth army in the world. On the other hand, few thousand activists, mainly Hamas activists, with so-called rockets, which are homemade, quite inefficient bombs. So there was no war in Gaza. There was a planned Israeli aggression against the most densely populated area in the world, more than Hong Kong. You throw a stone in Gaza, you hit someone. Everywhere. It's so packed. So when the Israelis are trying to say, we didn't target civilian population, we try to avoid targeting civilian population, they are either completely stupid or lying, and they are not stupid. What is interesting, but I may come back later on, what is interesting is that despite the completely uneven relation of forces, it was far from being an Israeli victory. Israel failed in Gaza. In fact, failed. In order to say failing, we have to ask what was the objective. But the objective was discovered during the war, the aggression itself. They said because of the rockets. And then they discovered the tunnels, or they discovered that the tunnels were not what they thought it was. So they said because of the tunnels. And then they said the objective was to get rid of Hamas government, Hamas leadership in Gaza. And they failed on all the levels. Until the last minute of the ceasefire, there were rockets. The tunnels are already built again. And Hamas is gaining more popularity than before in Gaza and in Palestine in general, and I would say even in the whole Arab world. It was not an Israeli success. Thank you. It was a kind of draw, null. But if we use the image of football, if we have a draw between, let's say, Algerian team and Brazil, it's a victory for Algeria. Even if it's 0-0 or 2-2, it's a big victory for Algeria. I would say it's the same with Gaza. Even a draw is a victory for Gaza, its population, and its steadfastness and its leadership. What is politically interesting, that Gaza was not the goal. They attacked Gaza, but Gaza was not the real goal. And Hamas was not the real goal. And I may surprise you, but for the Israeli government, by attacking Gaza under the leadership of Hamas, they were targeting Mahmoud Abbas. Why? Because they thought they will put Abbas in an impossible situation, in a lose-lose situation. In each case, he will lose. Either as the president of the Palestinian people, he will express openly and publicly its solidarity with Gaza, and then the Israelis will be able to say, you see, Abu Mazen, Hamas, all the same shit. They are the same, and the National Government Union is a confirmation that they are all terrorists, all a threat to so-called Jewish Christian civilization, and we are right not to negotiate and not to speak with Abu Mazen. And if Abu Mazen would not express his support and solidarity with Gaza, then he will lose every kind of legitimacy among its own people. So for the Israelis, in each case, they will win. Why Abbas? Why the Palestinian Authority sitting in Ramallah was the real target? Because Mahmoud Abbas and the Palestinian Authority are identified by the international community, the whole international community, as the partners for peace negotiation, for a settlement between Israel and the Palestinians. Because Mahmoud Abbas is not only ready for such a settlement, but sometimes, I'm sorry to say it, I try not to attack Palestinian leaders, but sometimes he is even crawling to the negotiation table and knocking at the door of the State Department and the White House and saying, I am waiting, you would call me, I am waiting, and for 4 years he's waiting, and silence on the other side. Why Abbas? Because the top priority for this Israeli government, and the previous ones too, is to freeze or to put out of track any attempt to reach real negotiation. Not talking, they are talking all the time. I have admiration for that. I really have an admiration for Mahmoud Abbas and other Palestinian leaders. The hundreds of hours they are sitting and talking with Israelis, while they know, like you know, like I know, that there is nothing to speak about. And this patience I admire, frankly. And to eat the cookies of Mrs. Netanyahu is also a big heroism, I heard. And but really from the Palestinian side, no one, I think, today in the international community, including the American administration, will deny that Mahmoud Abbas is a partner ready for negotiation, ready to pay, I will not say any price, but very heavy price for a very cheap good in exchange. So he has to be neutralized. He and the Palestinian Authority are today what allow the international community, including the White House, to say there is a partner. It's not true. The old Israeli story, we would like to negotiate, we would like to have a compromise, but with whom? We have no partners. It doesn't work anymore. Better partner that the present Palestinian Authority, Israel cannot dream of. If they would like to have a partner, but they don't want a partner, and when there is someone who is considered to be a potential partner, he has to be delegitimized and destroyed. This is the main political objective of the various Israeli governments in the last 5, 6, 7 years. To dismantle the bomb of the negotiation, what they call the diplomatic bomb. There is terrorist bombs and there is diplomatic bombs, and they have to be dismantled. Why? And now we are entering the heart of the Israeli policy. Because any kind of settlement, political settlement, any kind of negotiation will bring about, I will not say decolonization, but at least freezing of the colonization process. First thing, to freeze. And the strategy of the Israeli governments in the last, since the late 70s, with some exceptions, Rabin was a small parenthesis, is the strategy, the Israeli project, the Israeli plan is colonization, is to build Israel. I used to call it, in lectures and in writings, the Sharon plan. There was in Israel only two real political leaders. David Ben-Gurion, the founder of Israel, and Ariel Sharon. The one David Ben-Gurion used to call my beloved son. And Ben-Gurion identified in young Sharon, when he was a young general, a young colonel, that he is exactly the type of leader Israel needs. And they have in common a real vision for Israel. All the others, all, including Rabin, were small politicians. You know, politicians you buy, we had an argument before, with one falafel or two falafel, you buy them. They have no vision, they are corrupted, mentally corrupted, sometimes really corrupted. Many of them are in prison or in a process of being judged. Almost every prime minister in the last 20 years, and other ministers. Sharon also, in fact. But Sharon has something neither Netanyahu or Olmert or Ehud Barak has. Two wonderful sons who took everything on themselves. And they say, it was not daddy, it was us. I wish to have such children. When I went to prison, maybe my son would come, no, it's not daddy, it's me. But let's put the small politicians and speak about the two political leaders. And they used the same, what is Sharon plan, is almost word by word Ben-Gurion plan 30 years before. I will speak about or summarize Sharon plan in 4 points. Not because of Sharon is out, now definitely out, but because it is an Israeli project. It is, it's a project which don't have to be voted anymore, not to be discussed in the parliament or in the government. Sometimes people ask me, journalists, Israeli journalists, but where this plan was voted? He said, it's like capitalism in Europe. You don't vote every year, are we for or against? It's a reality. After there are political debate, whether it should be more social, more liberal, less liberal, but the framework is a framework. Sharon's plan is Israeli plan. I call it like a bulldozer. You put the GPS, and the engine, and it's working. We have a driver who was in a coma for many years, but he was still driving, because it was driving alone. The ones who are leading this policy are not the parliamentarians. They don't know. Whether they accept it or not, they don't know. It's already on the level of administration. The army, the settlers, and all the officers dealing with this plan, with this project. And the project aims to make Israel Palestine and Palestine Israel. To push the border gradually, and I insist, gradually, on the ground, and I insist on the ground, not by a vote in the parliament. It has no value. There have been many votes or many propositions of the right wing to say that the border of Israel is the Jordan River. And every clever politician, like Sharon, say, why to say it? Do it! Why to make the Americans angry? Why to look like aggressors? Why to look like what we are? Let's keep something where Shimon Peres is the master, the universal master, hypocrisy, our policy, to try to keep an image which has nothing to do with what we are doing. Shimon Peres was paid for 60, 70 years to do that, especially in Europe. So what is this Israeli plan? I can summarize in 4 sentences, all taken from an interview Ariel Sharon gave to Haaretz newspaper in 2003. And it was such an important interview that all the major newspapers in the world, the London Times and New York Times and Washington Post and Le Monde and Repubblica, all reproduced completely the interview, and it was important, which shows that journalists are not so stupid, which it's my position. I don't share the position that all the journalists are lying and telling. I think there are many very good journalists doing their job. And so I will summarize 4 quotes from the interview, which if we understand them well, we understand what is the Israeli strategy, and then we'll try to see how the peace process, so-called peace process, entered. First, a peace agreement with the Palestinians, first quote, a peace agreement with the Palestinians is not on the agenda for the next 50 years. Now, some people understand it that it is simply a matter he doesn't want to negotiate. No. What is important is 50 years. We still need 50 years, and then we are ready to negotiate. Why? Second quote, because Israel do not have borders and should not fix borders. This is a quote of David Ben-Gurion, who always opposed, and you will not see anywhere, in any document, any constitutional document, any official, in the Israeli constitution, there is no constitution, something which defines Israeli borders. No borders. Because it's an open matter. It's a dynamics, and it's connected to the third quote, our border is where we plant our last tree. Our border is what we are doing. Now we can connect the 3 together. We need still 50 years, maybe 60, maybe 40, but we need time to create the border by facts on the ground, not by votes in the parliament, by facts on the ground, to be able to show to the international community, to the Palestinians, you see, this is Israel. This is an Israeli settlement. This is an Israeli town. This is an Israeli industrial area. This is an Israeli commercial zone, an Israeli road. Some of you have been in the tour I organized around Jerusalem to show it. You can show it even in a small place like Greater Jerusalem area. How one gas station is moving the border. Gas station. Especially important is, this was a quote not of Sharon, but his chief of staff, Dov Weissglass, who used to say, we will not have 100, or it was additional 100,000 additional settlers. The question is not demographic, it's not a quantity of settlers, but where we put the settlements and how by building this whole project in a very planned and really based on reading the map, how we make the space Israeli, and how from small settlements isolated here and there in a Palestinian area we reverse the picture by making an Israeli area with islands, sometimes big island. It can be, one island can be Ramallah, one island can be Nablus, one island can be Gaza. But these are what I call the holes in the Emmental cheese. You know the Emmental? Emmental is made of two things, of cheese and holes. If no holes, no Emmental. Something else. Huh? Yes, Bantustan cantons. Sharon already in 1976 called it the cantons, the cantonization project. He was very coherent. And if the Palestinians would like to call these holes, that is what Israel doesn't want. They want to call it Palestinian state, or even better, Palestinian states, 2 states, 3 states, 4 states, or kingdom, or Palestinian empire. Be my guest. Sharon also very typically, like Ben-Gurion, had no problem with symbols. He is a real settler. The land, what we are doing on the ground. The names, the flags, the Palestinian flag, 1 flag, 2 flags, a seat at the UN, it would not have been a big battle for Sharon. As long as we control the space and we move the border, surround the Palestinians with a wall or with few checkpoints, which Sharon always didn't like the wall. It's too static. Checkpoints have the same effect and is less static. You can move it more easily. And what we don't want, it's yours. You, the Palestinian. You do it whatever you want. But you keep limited in the areas we don't want. And I believe that if Sharon wouldn't have his IVC's attack, what he did in Gaza, the redeployment out of Gaza, he would have done it in Jenin, he would have done it in Nablus. It was part of a long-term plan to get rid of what we don't want, what is not Israel. Here, many journalists were mistaken. When they presented Sharon of the redeployment from Gaza as a new Sharon. New Sharon with the age became more moderate, more... No. It's the same Sharon. He didn't want Gaza. Who wants Gaza? 1.7 million Palestinians on a small piece of territory, take this territory, we don't want it. You cannot add one Jewish settlement there, there is no place. Take it. He gets rid of Gaza. He didn't compromise. He gets rid of Gaza, and I believe if there would have been a real political leader after Sharon, but there was not, they would have continued in other places. I will add, I will not enter the whole story, but I will add in parentheses that there was one disagreement with the American administration about Sharon's plan. At that time it was Bush, George W. Bush administration. Condoleezza Rice say it's very good. It's a plan taking into consideration the idea of two states, but a Palestinian state made of 6, 7, 10 cantons separated from each other, it can be a provisory situation. It cannot be the solution. We need something with a continuity. Already there is no continuity between Gaza and the West Bank. But if there will be no continuity between Jenin and Nablus, or between Nablus and its isolated islands, it cannot convince neither the Palestinians nor the international community and nor the common sense. This is not a state. When Sharon heard continuity, he said, no way. Because Sharon, who was not a good student in school, according to the biography, but knew that if we have a continuity from north to south, you cut the continuity from east to west. You cannot have two lines, one is breaking the other. So if there is an Israeli continuity from Tel Aviv to the Jordan River, there is no continuity for the Palestinian entity. And if there is a continuity from Jenin to Hebron, then we don't have an Israeli continuity, which includes the Jordan Valley. And for Sharon and all the Israeli politicians, the Jordan Valley is Israel. So how do we resolve this problem? And it was resolved by passing from a two-dimension geometry. I know this is hard, because at that time I was not at school anymore. From two-dimension geometry to a three-dimension geometry. In three-dimension, you can have two continuities, yes? If you have a three-dimension, you take a cube, you can have a line from here to there and another line, and they don't cut each other, yes? Yeah, basic mathematics. Even I understand it. So what does it mean, a three-dimension geometry? By a whole system of bridges and tunnels. And whoever has been in Palestine, and whoever, or in Israel, and its extensions, and whoever has been in the tour I organized every few weeks, would see that this is not a dream, it's not an abstract project, it is a reality. How on the road 443, for example, the Israeli new road inside the West Bank, you have bridges or sometimes tunnels connecting a Palestinian village and other Palestinian village from under, or sometimes from up, from a bridge. And we are now witnessing a whole system of separated roads, not in the sense sometimes used by some activists in the solidarity movement. Apartheid it's not in the concept of separating. We don't want Arabs in our road. No, we want separation. Separation while controlling the whole space, and this separation is by these kind of bridges and tunnels, connecting the Palestinian enclaves, cantons, enclaves, to each other. Today, or in the next few years, it will be achieved. You will be able to go from Jenin to the southern West Bank without passing, not only in Israel, but in extended Israel, meaning all the settlement blocks annexed already de facto to Israel. If this is the Israeli plan, any peace process, any serious attempt, not talks, but serious attempt to negotiate, will stop it. And where the Israelis are real world champion is gaining time. Playing, I don't know how to say it in English, playing the watch, like in some football games also. You know, you send from here to there. The Israelis usually, except the present government, who is on that level completely stupid, previous government, and especially Shimon Peres, are excellent in saying, not saying no. Say, yes, of course, we are ready to negotiate. But we have A, B, C, D as precondition. Yes, we are ready to negotiate, but not now, we have elections. Or not now, we have I don't know what. So let's meet for a preparatory meeting aimed to organize a meeting which will decide about the schedule in 6 months from now. One of the mistakes of Hamas now, I jump to reality again, was to accept the Israeli condition to open the negotiation on the future of Gaza in 4 months. 4 months? Sure, nothing will happen. Nothing will happen on the level of negotiation. Because Israel will invent 100 pretexts why, yes, we said we are ready to negotiate. But in the meantime, Ahmadiyya made a declaration which is anti-Semite. So, forget it, finished. Or in the meantime, we didn't know that there will be Daesh, the ISIS, I don't know how to call it here, Daesh. It's new, so we have to think again. So let's meet in 9 months from now, etc., etc. This is an old Israeli game that all the Israeli leaders, all without exception, played, including Oslo, including Yitzhak Rabin. It was a way to gain time. Maybe it's a debate historians will deal with in 20 years. Was Yitzhak Rabin bona fide, did he really intend or not? We can argue for it. It doesn't matter anymore. Was it only a trick? Or there was an attempt to say, let's find a solution? I don't know. I don't want to enter this debate. But this was a small, ridiculously small parenthesis. Neither before, and certainly not after, there was any intention, and I say it as you hear it, any intention ever from any Israeli leader and government, right-wing, far right-wing, left, center, to negotiate bona fide with the Palestinians, because when I say bona fide, it means ending the occupation. Ending the occupation, freezing the colonization, and starting a process of decolonization. No Israeli government whatsoever ever intended to do that. Why? Because the Israeli plan needs still 50 years or 40 years to achieve the ultimate goal of the Zionist project. This is the Israeli plan. This is the Israeli reality on the ground. This is the Israeli strategy and policy. Question: will it work? If the game was only an Israeli-Palestinian game, a face-to-face game, I would say, unfortunately, it will work. The relation of forces are so uneven. The support of the United States, the support of Europe, even, and I will deal with it at the end, there are more and more voices who say it's enough. The military might, the lack of real pressure on Israel is such. The support of Egypt, to give an example concerning Gaza, so that is a support even in the heart of the Arab world, on the one hand, and the Palestinians, with all their bravery and heroism and steadfastness they can keep on the land, which is already a big victory, they cannot win this battle with Israel. But fortunately, it's not a face-to-face, only an Israeli-Palestinian face-to-face. It's not in a vacuum. And this should give the Palestinians, first of all, but all of us, hope. Hope, a rational hope, not a hope kind of religious hope. No, something based on reality. It is not an Israeli-Palestinian game disconnected from the rest of the world, the Arab world, and the world. And this world is changing, not necessarily in the good direction from an Israeli point of view. I will mention 3 elements. There are more. First, the Arab Revolution, or revolutions, or the Arab Spring. It is earthquake. Now, I am speaking about revolution in the real sense of the term, a long-term process with ups and downs and step forwards and periods of restoration and reaction, democratic openings, and after military dictatorship. I'm speaking about a revolution which may take 20 years, 30 years, like the French Revolution. It took 100 years to achieve its goals and to stabilize it. The Arab Revolution will be shorter, I think, but it will take a lot of time. I remember 1 year after the Tahrir Square first mobilization, I was interviewed by one of the channels of the Israeli radio. And the journalist said, Michael, can you make a balance sheet of the revolution? I knew it will be the question, of course. And I start laughing. I say, what did you say? Balance sheet? Balance sheet? But it hardly started. You want me to make a balance sheet and evaluation? It started. Call me if I am alive in 20 years, and then we will maybe be able to make a first evaluation. It was never broadcast. So the Arab Revolution, it's an earthquake in the area. Second, earthquake with something doubly new. First, it's the first time, almost, during the last 50 years, there have been few events in this part of the Middle East when the people are a political actor. Not military coup, not a matter of among the elites, political, usually military or political elite or kingdoms. No, it's something where the people are profoundly active. Second, it is the first time since Israel was created or stabilized, the beginning of the 50s, where Israel couldn't play any role, any disturbance role. They were trying hard. And even Obama said, we have enough troubles now, keep quiet. We don't need you now. I was speaking about the Israeli radio. During the Tahrir Square mobilization, one morning I was listening to the Israeli radio, and the correspondent, what we call an Arabist, someone who has been trained in the secret services of the army or the Shin Bet, knows Arabic perfectly, and then he became journalist. But not a bad person, not very intelligent either, was making a reportage in the morning, and he was describing the square and the people in the square, Tahrir Square in Cairo. and describing the covered women and the non-covered women, and how it was clean. They were brooming all the time, and what kind of energy. And you could hear from his voice that he was quite impressed, which made the editor on the other side of the telephone in Jerusalem angry. So after he was describing this festival, because it has something festive also, something with full of energy and joy, the journalist in Jerusalem said, okay, we understand, we hear you, we understand. Mm-hmm. But what are they saying about us, Israel? And then there was 2-3 seconds of silence, and he said, nothing. And the reaction of the journalist in Jerusalem was, nothing? And cut. It was finished. But I was thinking after this, nothing? If we are not a factor in this revolution. If we cannot do it or stop it, we cannot save our friend Mubarak, we cannot save our friend Ben Ali in Tunis, we have very limited impact. Why should the Americans pay $3.5 billion every year for nothing? I don't believe in love stories in politics. It's not a matter of love. It's not a common reading of the Bible. Sometimes I read. It's not the Jewish lobby. If the American administrations, all the administration since after Eisenhower, are supporting fully Israel, it's because we are playing a role, because we are serving them. And we are, in fact, a kind of big plane, how do you call it? Yes, exactly. An aircraft carrier of the United States at a very cheap. We are much, much cheaper than an 8th fleet or the 9th fleet. They would have to have instead of Israel. $3.5 billion, it's nothing. They do it because they know we keep their interests, we keep American order in the area. If we start being nothing, we are not yet nothing. But if the process is being less and less something, then one day, for sure, and we don't have to anticipate already, many American leaders, especially generals, General Petraeus, for example, are saying, shouldn't we revisit our policy towards Israel? Don't we reach a point where what we are paying is higher than what we are getting? Not paying 3.5 billion, this is nonsense. Paying in being the Israeli umbrella, the pro-Israeli in the United Nations, in the international, losing points. What the Russians are saying to the Arabs and to the Muslims, the Russians, the Chinese, the Indians now, don't trust the US. They are in the pocket of Israel. Go with us. The Americans are paying a price. They are paying a price for something. But if it is becoming more and more nothing, for sure there will be a new policy. Not now. The strategic alliance between the US and Israel is very strong, but there are more and more questions. And I'm speaking, like the revolution, I am speaking 20, 30 years, I'm speaking the next 10, 15 years. Second, Arab Revolution. Second, which is connected to what I just said, the decline of US power and US hegemony in the Middle East. It is finished when the Middle East was 100% Israeli, US playground, time of Bush and before. No other power, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the US were the only bosses in the area, and we were the little dog of the boss, we Israel. But now there are many bosses, and our boss is tired and has a lot of problems. Tired, losing power, while others are emerging. I mentioned the Russians. Chinese are coming from the Gulf countries with huge economical interests, which means political, which means military after. India, Brazil, South Africa, all these are local mini powers competing with American hegemony, which is not hegemony anymore. And local powers, Turkey, and for sure, Iran. So the whole map is changing with the weakening, the decline, the planned, I would say, decline of US in the area and the new regional actors. Such a new global context and regional context definitely is an asset for the Palestinians. I told you I don't like to give Palestinians advices, but a couple of years ago I had the opportunity in the framework of a solidarity activity in Bilain to sit with Prime Minister from the World Bank with the Palestinian Prime Minister. And we had an exchange. I was not trying to change his mind, his politics. I am not a child anymore. I know my limits. I know who is he and who am I. But I was asking one question. With the new reality in the area, why the Palestinians, doesn't he think that the Palestinians should diversify their international policy? Why to put all their eggs in Washington? I didn't suggest stop with Washington, but put one egg in the hands of the Russians, one egg in the hands of the Brazilians, one egg. Why not to diversify economically, but also diplomatically? You say, yes, you are right. Okay, but I do believe that new opportunities are open even in the framework of the bourgeois traditional international diplomacy, which could improve the Palestinian camp in its struggle with Israel. I mentioned three factors. There is a fourth one, which is a decline of Israeli power. Now, it sounds a paradox. Such brutality in Lebanon, 2006, it's not far away. In Gaza, 2009, and again now. Why I'm speaking about decline of Israeli power? Because, and I already mentioned the Arab Revolution, the total inability to have any kind of input, any kind of controlling the situation. But let's take the two examples, Gaza recently and Lebanon before. In both cases, it was a failure. Israel didn't achieve any goal. They wanted to destroy Hezbollah. Hezbollah is stronger than ever. Hezbollah has problems, but not connected to the Israeli question. On the contrary, if Israel will attack Hezbollah, it will add much more power to Hezbollah. So the attempts to change the regime in Lebanon, or to change the relation of forces, the political relation of forces and the military relation of forces, was a total failure. Gaza was a failure. They didn't succeed to weaken Hamas, not to dismantle the Hamas government, but even to weaken it. Moreover, and I think it's not a secret for you, although Austria is not the best example, but there is a process of growing isolation of Israel in the world. In the countries of the south, it's clear, but even in the north, we are still far from cutting relations or real confrontation with Israeli politics. But you can hear more and more and more unrest with and I am not speaking about public opinion, this will be my next point. No, about the establishment, about the states, about the international community. When the Europeans now decided to make some problem with Israeli chicken because they don't answer some conditions, health conditions, no one is stupid in Israel. It has nothing to do with health conditions. It's a political warning. It's not new that the Israeli chicken are like that and not like that. But they use it. And there are many, when the Dutch water company decide to change its contract and maybe to cut completely the relation with the Israeli water company, it's a water company, but it's a signal. And we have dozens and dozens of that signals. In that sense, and I anticipate what I wanted to say at the end, BDS, the international campaign, which hopefully next year we celebrate our 10 years of campaign, have got achievements much bigger and quicker than what I at least was expecting. I remember the first years I said it's not a 100 meters run or 200 meters run, it's a marathon. It will be a long struggle, and it will be a long struggle. But I wouldn't have expected already that part of this campaign of sanctions on Israel, including boycott, is not anymore activist, only what activists are doing in the supermarket or demonstrating in a harbor. It already is a tool used by much bigger institutions, including states. So public opinion is lost for the Israelis. There is still a debate in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs whether it's a lost battle and why to spend millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in hasbara, in propaganda, while it's a lost case, or this was the position of Lieberman, the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Leave it. We don't spend anymore. We don't spend, it's lost case, it's lost money, so let's invest in other, in strengthening dictatorships in South America or in Africa, to strengthen our friends, and not to try anymore to convince those who are not our friends and will not be again our friends. This is a debate on the level of how to defend, whether or not to try to save Israeli image. But the very fact that there is a debate, whether or not it is a lost case, is in itself a confirmation that we lost a lot in public image, in legitimacy, I would say, and we will hear more and more voices, institutional voices, criticizing Israeli policy and denouncing Israeli policy and starting, I am sure, to sanction. We are still far from cutting any connection with Israel. We are not South Africa of the end of the apartheid. I would say we are South Africa in the beginning of the campaign, but against international campaign against apartheid. When banks will connect the relation with Israel, we know with Israel banking system that we achieve most of our campaign. Where is my last point? Where is Israeli public opinion? Let's take Gaza. The Gaza massacre as an example. The biggest demonstration we have been able to organize in Tel Aviv, we were 3,000. I remember that during the Lebanese war, 1982, 1985, we had demonstration of hundreds of thousands. Would like to remind that during the Intifada, 1987, 1990, we had demonstration of 100,000, tens of thousands for sure, sometimes more than 100,000. It means that we had a public opinion against the war, against the occupation. 3,000 is not a public opinion. It's a marginal group. And even among the 3,000 who demonstrated in Tel Aviv, I discovered it's a demonstration where I had no formal responsibility. I was not a speaker, not in charge of relation with the police, which is my usual job, and to organize the, how do you call it, the marshals, the one who keep the demonstration, who protect the demonstration. I was there as a normal activist and a normal citizen. So I use the time to listen to the people. And I discovered that most of the people who were there were the 1,000 activists. They always will be there. They always have been there. And there were 2,000, 1,500, half of the demonstration, let's say, of men and women which I didn't see in demonstration in the past. I know them personally, many of the kind, not many of them, the kind. Tel Aviv middle class, educated middle class, not on the right wing of the politics, but definitely not pro-Palestinians. They are first of all pro-Tel Aviv and pro themselves. Neoliberal in their conception, what interests them, very individualist, and very quickly I understood that these people were not demonstrating for Gaza. Yes, the demonstration was solidarity with Gaza. I believe they had some empathy with the suffering of the population of Gaza. But their main motivation was Tel Aviv. Their main motivation was where Israel is going. What kind of state are we? What kind of society are we becoming? They want to be part of Europe. They don't want to be a progressive state. No, they want to be part of Europe, of the Western world, of the nice Western democracy. And Gaza, like many other things which happened during the last years or last decade, is making us more and more different from the kind of image they would like to have abroad. We are becoming a fundamentalistic, ultranationalist, racist, ugly, smelling bad country and society. And they feel it. It's not a Palestinian point of view. It's the point of view of Tel Aviv. I call it Tel Aviv because I am from Jerusalem. And you know there is a holy war between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. They are the middle class. They are the nice Israel. The liberal Israel. Not the Israel of the settlers. They don't like settlers. But they will not move their ass to fight against the settlers. They will say, one day it will finish. And they will go to business, to high tech. They were demonstrating because they are feeling that Israel is becoming something they are afraid of, for themselves, not for Gaza. But still 3,000, which means nothing. And I was very worried. Why only 3,000? I know that this feeling, if only to defend Tel Aviv, is much bigger. And then, a couple of weeks later, it was just after the ceasefire, no, it was still during that, after the ceasefire, I had an insight. In order to understand it, you have to understand some kind of architecture. My daughter is living like any young couple in a small apartment. She cannot afford a big apartment. And like my daughter, I have a big apartment and a big terrace. Yeah. Which has become the place of gathering of my children, friends, when they want to sit and to discuss. They come to me, and because there is place, and because alcohol is free, I am paying. So, towards the end, or maybe just after the ceasefire in Gaza, my daughter and I would say between 15 and 20 of her friends, all educated, middle class, young couples in the 30s of their life, were sitting together to celebrate something, the return of one couple from the States after 2 years. So I was sitting and listening. I didn't want to interfere, but I want to feel. And what surprises me was the fact that there was only one topic in the discussion. For 2.5 hours they were sitting, drinking, and discussing one thing. How to leave the country, when to leave the country, where to live, what should we do with the children, they are in the middle of their school, problems of papers, problems of jobs. The whole topic was surrounding. I was for a year, my son-in-law, for example, who is a lot in Berlin. I was in Berlin. In Berlin there is a lot of job, no problem. And another one say, yes, but I come back from the US, it's not so easy. This was a discussion. How to escape Israel. And I'm speaking about the elite. They all were highly educated and very Israeli. People all born in Israel. Most of them are already, their parents were born in Israel. A week, 2 weeks later, when I listen, I say, okay, this is the small milieu of my children. I was sad, because if the good people are living with even more shit, and more fascism, and more racism, and all those who can fight back are simply raising their hands and leaving. But then I said, because I don't like stories with, I like story only with happy end. I say, no, it's only them, it's fine, it's not a national phenomenon. And then, a couple of weeks ago, in the supplement, the feast, Yom Kippur feast supplement of Haaretz, there was a reportage of 6 pages, big pages, about the problem of youth emigration from Israel. And they were speaking about 100,000 who left in the last years or are going to leave now. Then I understood 2 things. First, it was not specific to my balcony and to the friends of my daughter, but it is a real social phenomenon. And second, sorry for that we are in a deep shit. Because if all they are living, what remain? Lieberman, the settlers, the races. In a society, and I will finish here, a society which has become, I used in an article which had made some noise, because I said, yes, fascism. And I explained that I don't use easily the word fascism. I am not the one in demonstration saying fascist, government fascist, the police is fascist. Fascism is something very special. And I don't speak about extermination of Jews, of Nazism. I speak in fascism. It's a kind of regime. It's a very brutal regime. And we didn't have in Israel fascism. We have colonialism, definitely. And my tools of analysis are always in the world of colonialism much more than fascism. But in the last few years, we have the development in the inner relation of Israel, not in the relation with the Palestinians of Gaza, the West Bank, but in the inner relation of Israel, a real process of fascization, a real process, with on all its aspects. The brutality of the political discourse, the legitimacy of racism, laws, new racist law, a series of laws which are limiting public liberties, public freedoms, freedom of speech, not of Arabs only, laws against NGOs, financing of progressive NGOs, not dramatic things, but it's an accumulation of laws, of public discourse, and now violence in the street. And I was speaking about fascism, but I wrote another article which made even more people worried, under the title, I Am Afraid. Explaining that for 50 years now I have been active, almost 50 years, in moments of total isolation and some moments with big opening like the Lebanese war, in moments where we were hated by the whole Israeli society, and some period where we got some legitimacy. And I even went to prison for a short time. But I don't remember I was afraid. And I got hit in demonstration, but I hit back. But never I had the feeling of being afraid. It's not nice to be hit, but it's part of the game. And the feeling of being afraid, of physical fear, is new for me, but it's here. In one of the demonstration, Solidarity with Gaza demonstration, my daughter was there. And I took her, really, and my daughter is an adult woman, she's not a child, she's free to do whatever she wants. But I felt the duty to take her like that, to say, Talila, out. Don't stay here, it's dangerous. You have 2 children at home, go home. It's something I felt, and I am not the only one. Every demonstration now in Jerusalem, in particular, is attacked by fascist gangs. Human rights organizations are visited. They didn't destroy anything. But B'Tselem and another organization got the visit of some of these ultra-right activists who came, entered, saying, you know, we know where you are. We don't do anything, but it's a warning. Demonstrators, after the demonstration, the 3,000 demonstration, some were followed by by small groups of counter-demonstrators until they reached their home. I discovered myself one day, usually my house is open. I never close. I have some small claustrophobia. I don't close my house with a key. Not only I close my house with a key, but the gate to the garden before you enter the house, I checked twice in one night to be sure I closed it. It was never closed in my life. Now, maybe it's my personal paranoia. Maybe it's a matter of age, I don't know. But no, I don't think so, because I know my friends also are sharing this fear, this feeling of being surrounded with brutality and with a smell of racism, and not a smell, an atmosphere. And you see it in the television, you see it in the parliament, you see it in the street, you see it in the newspapers. Racism always existed in Israel, but it was hidden. It was hidden. It was not nice to say, I hate Arabs. You could be racist, but, you know, you have to be somehow politically correct. There is no political correctness anymore at all. And this is why it's pushing. So it's not 3,000 demonstrators, it's 3,000 plus 100,000 leaving the country or discussing. I don't care if they, I don't care, I don't know. I believe most of them will not leave because it's not easy to leave. If you have a family, you have a job. But the very fact that they already left in their head, they are already outside, they are already planning a life outside, they are already dreaming a life outside, is extremely worrying. So I told you I don't like to finish without happy end. I need the happy end. And as you can hear from what I am saying, I don't have a lot of hopes. I didn't have a lot of hopes concerning the capacity from within the Israeli society for a kind of redeeming, for a kind of rebuilding, not of peace camp, but first of all, the belief that you can change. This is a precondition. After it will take a lot of ways, but and then, good surprise. A few weeks ago, and you should not underestimate it, the media published a petition from, now there are 60, 70, soldiers and officers of 8200. Unit 8200, it's in Israel, when you say 8200, you say everything. It's the elite unit of the military intelligence. To be 800, it's like to be a pilot. It's just after God and Jesus, then you have the pilot and 8200. These are not fighters, but they are the most brilliant analysts of the Israeli system. Usually they are 800 all their life. Even when they leave the army, they still are as reserve working with the unit. It's a brain of the Israeli army. And 8200, 37 and after 45, and now there are more than 60, 8200 signed a petition which started before Gaza, because it's not dealing with Gaza. It's dealing with a job they have been doing since the 70s in the West Bank, and saying enough. We, 200, you know what is our job? They wrote in the petition. It was to put all the Palestinian men and women, to spy all of them, each one individually, not military groups or political leaders. Each and every Palestinian, old and young, and men and women, and to spy their personal lives in order to blackmail them, and in order to try to have as many collaborators as possible by using their weaknesses, their problems in the family, their tensions between that village and another village, and saying a dirty cop work which has nothing to do with security. Now, the fact that they decide to open their mouths brings some smile again on my face. And I am sure that if 200 sign the petition, there will be new petitions now. And I know that in the army, people are thinking there is a group of paratroopers, of reserve paratroopers, who said, we also have things to say, and I know from family that they are now gathering in order to write an appeal. And I have the feeling that it's a kind of snowball opened by 200. So it helped me to remind that even when everything looked quite dark, sometimes a small initiative at the right moment by the right people can reopen the light. I don't know if it is true or not. I know I need to believe in it to continue. Thank you.